Hi, this is Teresa Momber. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to create 3 watercolor scenes that you can use as a background for your stamped cards. For my cards today, I'm using this Koi Watercolor Pocket Field Sketch Box by Sakura. But you could use whatever watercolors you have on hand, or even use your re-inkers for your ink pads. Any of that will work. And then for my paper, I'm using a combination. On one of the cards, I used Tim Holtz Distress Watercolor, and on two of the others, I used some watercolor by Strathmore. And I really do like the Tim Holtz watercolor because it's so white, but it's very textured on one side, so I prefer to use the smooth back side of that paper if you're using the Tim Holtz. I just don't like dealing with that texture. So let's get started. For my first card, I'll be showing you how to create the background for a card I shared at the release party for Gina K last month. And you can see on that card I used the window frame stamp and placed that over the background. On the second card I left that off so you could just see the whole background. The first thing I like to do is to tape down my watercolor paper because when it gets wet it tends to buckle, and then that's going to make it a lot harder to paint on and get an even look if you're trying to go for that. So I definitely recommend taping it down, and here I'm using my Score Pal mat, which is a great surface to tape it to, so if you have one of those I definitely recommend it. Since I'm going to be blending a lot of colors together, I'm going to start by saturating the paper lightly with water and let that soak in a bit. And then just start adding in a little bit of yellow, and I'm making horizontal streaks across the cardstock. And I'm going to build that color up slowly, just like I do when I'm sponging. Next, I'll add some pink above the yellow, and I'll just blend those in together. And I need that pink as a transition into the blue, because if I just went straight from yellow to blue, I would get green. Then I'm just going to keep building that color up in the middle there, adding more intense yellows with some orange added to them. Now here, just when I'm about to start saturating my paper again, I accidentally blobbed on a bit of yellow. So I just blotted that off with a paper towel, and that worked great. Next, I'm adding in some blue for the sky, and I'm just grabbing some colors off my palette and blending those together and just adding them in very slowly. I'll be layering this up just like the yellow. And you can see I'm also adding in a little bit of purple to transition between the blue and the pink, and just building that color up very slowly. If you find your paper is getting too wet, you can use a blow dryer or a heat tool to dry it a bit, or just let it sit until the water has soaked in a bit more. Next, I'll start on the foreground. I'm just using some green, and I like to add a bit of brown to my green, particularly in the foreground, just to create a little bit of variation. You don't want the green to all be the exact same tone. So I'll just build the color up slowly, again making a little darker toward the bottom of my scene and a little lighter closer to where I want the horizon line to be. Now I've switched to a smaller brush, and I'm just kind of sketching in a bit of a horizon line there, and then I'm pulling that color down with a clean brush so it just fades into the foreground a bit. Now I want this card to have the look of kind of some rolling hills, so I'm just playing around with that line until I'm happy with the look. Next, I'm going to create some texture in my grass and kind of the hint of flowers and dirt patches. So I'm just using a variety of colors, some yellows, some reds, and even a little browns to add that in. Now here I'm fairly happy with how this is looking, but I need to get a little more depth to this. So I'm adding some more color toward the bottom. That'll give it the illusion of distance in the background. Next, I've let my paper dry, and now I'm stamping the tree images from the Framescapes Window of Wishes stamp set from Gina K Designs, and I'm stamping that using Versafine Black Ink. Now going back to the watercolors, I'm mixing together some brown and green and black, and I'll use this to add in some shadows for the trees. And I'm just going to pull that color down a little bit to stretch those shadows out a bit. And then I'm just going to continue adding a little more texture to the foreground and deepen those shadows a bit until I'm happy with the result. To finish this card, I adhered my background to a piece of black onyx cardstock and then adhered both pieces to a 4¼ by 5½ inch sweet corn card base. For my next card, I'm going to use pretty much the same technique, but this time I'm doing a water scene. So I want the water to mirror what's going on in the sky. So I'll just duplicate anything I do above the horizon line, I'll do the same thing below the horizon line. And once again, just adding those colors in a little at a time and building it up slowly until I'm happy with the result. And anytime I get too much water on there, I can go back with my heat gun and dry it out a bit until I'm happy with the blending. I'm just going to let this video continue for a bit and quit talking until I'm ready to work on the next step. Okay, I'm back. Now, I'm pretty happy with how this is looking, but I want to get it to look a little bit cloudy, so I'm going to make it quite a bit darker and not really blend so much on this last little bit I'm doing. And you notice how I do it on the top and on the bottom. Next, I'm going to pick up a little black from my palette and mix it with some water. And I want this to be kind of a light gray, so I'm just going to sketch in some mountains using my paintbrush at the horizon line. Then I'll go back with some darker black and create some closer mountains. Now to get that reflection in the water of the mountain range, I'm just going to go back to some gray and try to mirror that look. Once my paper is dry, I can come back and stamp the tree images. Once again, these are from the Framescapes Window of Wishes stamp set from Gina K Designs. Now I want to create the reflection for the trees. So I'm going to do that just the way I did the shadows for the first card by just adding in some gray watercolor, letting that dry a bit and just building the color up until I'm happy with the look of those reflections. I wanted to stamp a few more images from the Framescapes Window of Wishes stamp set. So I removed the tape and now I'm just stamping the branch, once again using Versafine Black Ink in two places, and then I'll add in that little bird so he's resting on the branch. Next, I'm using my Opaque White Gel Pen to add in some stars to the sky and some ripples in the water. And I guess we'll just have to consider those clouds up there as pretty wispy clouds because you can see the stars shining through them. To assemble the card, I layered with a piece of black onyx cardstock and then put it on a 4¼ by 5½ inch wild lilac card base. For my third background, this time I'm working horizontally. So I've rotated my cardstock and I'm once again going to add that yellow band across the middle for where I want my horizon to be. And then I'll switch over to some green ink and start adding in more color both above and below the yellow. Just like in the previous two backgrounds, I'm going to build the color up pretty slowly, a layer at a time, alternating by drying things out a bit with my heat gun when the paper gets a little too saturated. Now, I don't do watercolor very often. I have very little experience with it, and that's why I'm so timid and build the color up so slowly. But if you feel more confident and just want to go at it, you can go with a heavier saturation and do it a lot quicker than this. And one thing I'd just recommend, if you do get too much color on there, just blot it off with a paper towel before it dries. And if you still have too much color, get it wet again and blot a little more. So you can remove quite a bit of color if it becomes necessary. Now with my background mostly in, I'm going to come in with some heavier colors and try to give the illusion of a real cloudy, stormy sky. And I'll do my best to mimic that look on the bottom of the paper so that it does look like a reflected water scene in the end. To create my horizon line, I'm just going to add in a land mass on either side of the cardstock and then just try to meet those a little bit right in the center. I'll make those darker at the waterline and have them fade out just a little bit toward the top. And once again, I'll create a mirror image of those land masses in the water below. Now this is getting pretty close, but I think it still looks a little washed out. So I'm going to saturate some of those colors in areas, particularly in the clouds and the reflections, to just try to make this look a little more interesting. Now I'm going to go back to those tree images from the Framescapes Window of Wishes stamp set and once again stamp using Versafine Onyx Black ink. Next, I want to create the reflection for the trees just like before. I'm just going to sketch those in a little bit and keep adding color until I'm happy with the look of those reflections. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull the tape and add in a few more stamped images. These images are from the Wetlands 2 stamp set, also from Gina K Designs, and I'm stamping using Versafine Onyx Black ink. And just like in the previous scene, I'm once again turning to that opaque white gel pen to get a few ripples in the water. To assemble this card, I'm layering with a piece of onyx black cardstock and then adhering both of those layers to a 5.5 by 4.25 inch turquoise sea card base. And here we have our 3 background scenes for stamping on. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching.